In life, we all encounter obstacles, and those obstacles come in all different shapes, sizes, and forms. The question is, how do we handle those obstacles? Do we attack them head on, or do we allow them to make us quit? Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast, where we aim to motivate and inspire listeners to never give up on themselves, their dreams, or their goals. We will interview successful people from all walks of life as they share their no-quit stories when they had the choice to give up or give in, but they didn't. We thank you for listening, and we hope to be that jolt of positivity as you go for your greatness. Welcome to episode number 146 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is resilience. Our quote of the day comes to us from Joshua Marine. Challenges are what makes life interesting, and overcoming them is what makes life meaningful. Today's episode is sponsored by the good people over at West Fair Communications, who publish the Westchester County Business Journal and the Fairfield County Business Journal. These newspapers do a wonderful job in covering all aspects of the business world within two of the most influential markets in the New York metropolitan area. You can also take advantage of their daily news feeds, which keep track on the companies and thought leaders in these important regions. For more information, take a look at www.westfaironline.com. Trust me, once you start reading, you won't quit. On today's episode, we have the opportunity of speaking with Richard Nongard. Richard is a speaker, psychotherapist, and an author who has a great no-quit story of his own. When the going got tough and thoughts of quitting came into his head, Richard didn't. He became resilient and he kept on going, and he rebuilt both his business as well as his personal life. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Richard, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Well, thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
I appreciate it. So the first question we ask everybody is, are you ready to bring it today?
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. It's been a while since I reached out to you, and it's great to be on the show and to be able to share.
I appreciate you being here. So the number one objective, as you know, of our show is to motivate and inspire listeners to never give up. And I was curious if you had either a no-quit story of your own or perhaps a challenging time that really tested you and you kept on going and didn't quit.
You know, I've actually had so many no-quit stories, and it seems like my life has been filled with ups and downs. But most recently, I had a story that I think is really kind of interesting, and that is I'm a professional speaker. It's what I do for a living. I do teaching, I do training, I do keynote speeches, and I built my business in the 1990s, and I continued to look forward to that being a sustaining business for many years. In 2015, I was doing a training on leadership in Beaumont, Texas. I was actually doing a training for school district principals and school superintendents, and it was a 2-day leadership training event, and I could barely get through it. I kept losing my voice. I kept coughing. I kept having to clear my throat. I felt like I was getting laryngitis, and so when I was driving back home from Beaumont, at that time I was living in Tulsa, Oklahoma, although now I live in sunny Las Vegas. I kept thinking to myself, well, it must be allergies. It was the fall, and I was hoping that a hard freeze would cure it. And the hard freeze came a week or two later, and when I woke up the next morning and didn't feel any better, I just sensed that something bad was going on. So I went to the doctor, and he scoped down my nose and down my throat, and he said, well, you got a big giant tumor there in your throat. It's probably one of two types of cancer. The best thing we can do is get in there, do a biopsy, and see what we can do. And he couldn't schedule the biopsy right away, so I actually had to wait a few weeks. And I totally lost my voice. I couldn't speak at all. So here I was, a speaker who was unable to speak. I'm also a therapist. And as a psychotherapist, I, of course, have to speak to my clients. So in my job as a trainer and keynote speaker, I couldn't do that, but I couldn't do my bread and butter job of meeting with clients and doing coaching and doing therapy because I couldn't speak at all. And so I had the biopsy, and the news didn't come back good, but they came back rather ambiguous. And that doctor was, I think, marginally helpful at the time, but he didn't really have a real solution for me. I ended up becoming really frustrated. My kids had grown up. My dog had died. My wife had left me, and I was a speaker who couldn't speak. And so I moved to Las Vegas, really almost planning to give up. Now, I have a lot of ties here, a lot of business ties and a lot of friends here. And people think of Las Vegas as the Strip, but once you're out of the tourist trap, it's really like any other Western city. But I came here really not quite sure what to do. And I really felt like quitting in that moment. But I found a new doctor here, a new surgeon, and he did a couple of surgeries over the next couple of months. And as you can hear, although my voice isn't perfect any longer, it's strong and it's sustainable. And the good news is I'm not dying.
That's a great story, and I'm glad that you're not dying. And I would say you actually have the voice perfect for movie previews.
Well, thanks. I used to do some voiceover work back in the early days when I was in college. But, I was really filled with fear when, as a person who's dependent on his voice to earn a living, I was no longer able to speak. And it was emotionally overwhelming for me. It wasn't just the money aspect. It was really the loss of identity and a lot of really grappling with what is it that I'm going to do? How do I find my voice? That's when I actually began writing, and I began writing a novel. I've written about 15 books, but they've all been textbooks. And so I began going to the Las Vegas Writers Meetup group, and I began honing my skills in writing dialogue and storytelling. And for me, it was really therapeutic. I also learned Chinese because, weirdly enough, Chinese is a tonal language, and it became more effective for me than speech therapy.
That's interesting. I know people that have learned Chinese, and they said it's one of, if not the hardest things to do. So it's definitely quite commendable in that way. So I have to ask you, during this tough time and when you transitioned to Vegas, what was it that kept you going? You mentioned the desire, or you wanted to quit multiple times. What is it that kept you going? Was it something you were reading, something you were telling yourself, affirmations? What really kept you going during those tough times?
I really did want to quit. I kept thinking to myself, hey, if you have $8,000 in the bank and you're over 50, which I am, you can move to Thailand and live by the sea on a retirement visa. So that crazy idea was actually kind of appealing when I was in that mode where I was fearing death and the inability to work. But what kept me going was really my friends here in Las Vegas. They were great. I used to actually perform here in Las Vegas back in the early 2000s. And so I have a lot of friends in the entertainment community. And the great thing about that community is it's on 24 hours a day here in Las Vegas. So I was able to meet up with people who actually cared about me, people who were interested in me, people who were willing to go out of their way to help me to find a role in what they were doing within the limitations that I had at that time. And having that strong network of friends was absolutely fantastic. And over the last couple of years, the last 3 years has been completely transformational. My business is successful once again. My friendships are as deep as they've ever been. I'm in a wonderful relationship now that I thoroughly enjoy. And not giving up was the best decision that I ever made.
No, I can't agree more with that. It's always the best decision. So if you had to define yourself in only one word, what would that word be?
Probably resilience. I have a long history of, I think, no-quit situations. And I don't know where I learned resilience, but I really live by the motto, as long as you're breathing, you're actually okay. I used to be afraid to fly, and then I realized that no matter how fearful it was, as long as I was breathing, no matter what the airplane was doing, I was actually okay. When I was faced with a wrong, ended up being a very weird medical situation. It was a wrong diagnosis of cancer. I did not have cancer. I do have a tumor in the base of my tongue that remains, but it's not malignant. But when I was faced with the idea of potentially having cancer and dying, I really recognized in that moment that as long as I'm breathing, I'm actually okay. And that recognition has been, I think, the key to the resilience that has guided me through a number of different situations.
No, resilience is a great word, and I think it goes hand in hand with our no-quit message and our no-quit tribe. So I wanted to ask you, one of the things we often talk about is different books and things within the personal development world. I was curious if you've read anything recently, or if you're reading something currently that you'd like to recommend to our listeners.
So Charles Hannell wrote a book that many people have not read. And a lot of people have read his book, The Master Key System, but he wrote a book called Mental Chemistry. This was back in the 1920s. And the book Mental Chemistry, I think, is even better than his book. than his book, The Master Key System. I think it's more practical, and I think it's spot on. And that's a book that I've actually been recently rereading. I moved into a new house, and in my new house, I was unpacking all my old books. And so I put that on my desk, and I've actually been going through it over the last couple of weeks and the last couple of months, and it's absolutely fantastic.
You touched on something that stands out a bit, is a lot of our guests in the past have talked about the concept of rereading something. And I think it's interesting because a lot of people read a book, whether it's recommended or they find it themselves, and they really enjoy it. They take notes and they really go through it. And all of a sudden you fast forward a month, 2 months, 3 months, and you forget some of that stuff. So I think it's interesting how so many of our past guests have talked about rereading different books, whether it's Think and Grow Rich or How to Win Friends and Influence People. But I think there's so many people that actually go back and reread it, maybe not every year, but every couple of years. And I find myself doing that quite often, because I think what happens is that the book has a lot of value, but you forget some of the stuff, and all of a sudden something like a move where you move a book onto a desk or something, it reiterates to you like, you know what, I should probably look at this again.
Absolutely. I think rereading a book is a great idea because it is through repetition that we drive ideas into the subconscious mind. And it's through our subconscious mind that we actually engage in most of the tasks and activities of the day. So by internalizing something at the deepest levels, we have the ability then to take action on the knowledge which we have acquired.
Speaking of action, that's one of the two words, action and accountability, that we talk about quite often. I wanted to ask you what the word accountability means to you.
Accountability, I think, is a word that really helps me to create alignment with the values that I have. I think everyone can probably relate to the experience of taking an action that you recognize is incongruent with the values that you have. And that's your own inner voice helping you to be accountable to your best self. I think we often talk of accountability in the context of accountability partners and having somebody else to hold us accountable. But the reality is that cognitive dissonance that we experience when we're acting outside of our own values is a powerful way for us to become accountable to ourselves. And so I look at accountability really from that perspective in many situations.
No, I think you hit it on the head. It's first about yourself and then others, and I think that's why accountability partners is something we often talk about are successful when you find that person that works for you. And not everybody is going to be a good accountability partner, but at the end of that partnership, the reality is you're individually each looking at yourself and your best interest. You're just helping the other along the way.
Absolutely.
So, assuming the 20-year-old version of yourself would have listened, what's the one piece of advice that you would have given to the 20-year-old Richard?
Probably the one piece of advice would have been to follow your dreams, the things that you want the most, as opposed to trying to fit within the expectations of what other people want for you. I think it's probably something that a lot of people can relate to. I hear that from many people, but my 20-year-old self was really about trying to make other people happy. And I think it held me back from personal success and personal happiness for a number of years.
No, I love that definition that you gave, because I think that piece of advice, because I think a lot of people do things when they're 18, 19, 20, 21, and not that they're doing anything for bad reasons, but typically it's a parent or someone that's raising you or a family or friend that says, hey, you should go here and you should go to this school and you'd be a really good accountant or you'd be really good in the investment world. And I think unfortunately what happens a lot of times is you kind of fall down the path of doing something that you think for others. But I love that advice, because the reality is you only get one life, so why not go after what you really and truly want?
You know, when I was 20 years old, my family was telling me, you have to have a real job. You can't be a magician forever. I had paid for college doing magic and balloon animals. What I learned is you actually can be a magician forever. Some of my friends here in Las Vegas have their posters on the sides of rather large hotels, and I've had the opportunity to perform here in Vegas on a number of occasions, but I didn't get those opportunities until I was in my 40s. And sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had taken advantage of those opportunities in my 20s. So
that's the second piece of advice, is take advantage of all the opportunities that come your way.
Absolutely. Now, I don't regret anything. Where I've been in life has brought me to where I am right now. And where I am right now is really a pretty wonderful place. I'm actually looking outside my window. I can see the green grass of our beautiful golf course in our neighborhood. There's some mature trees. My dog is at my side. I'm talking to a great podcasting host. I'm talking about the things that I love. I'm talking about leadership and helping people to create engaged teams. So I have absolutely no regrets about where it's ended up. But along the way, it's been difficult at various points and various times.
I think that's the best part of life is it's all about, you have nobody goes down an exact straight line. You have curves, you have dead ends, but the fact that you keep going is the important thing.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to ask you, if you could have dinner with anybody, dead or alive, who would it be and why? Probably Jim Rome. Why would that be?
Just an inspirational person, a person I think I could learn a lot from, a person I'd love to I'd love to kind of get in the inside of his head and receive some personal advice from somebody who I think is wise and who has had a tremendous impact on a lot of people.
No, definitely. I think that would be quite a dinner, and we reference him all the time on our show, and we did a speaking event this past Saturday, and we actually spoke probably about 3 or 4 of his very famous quotes, so definitely would be quite an interesting dinner.
Sure.
So how do you personally define success? What does success mean to you?
I look at success as really living out your core values. Values clarification is a very important process, both in the lives of the individual and in the life of any company. Companies are successful when they understand what it is that they stand for. This is why companies like Apple and why Starbucks and why Coca-Cola actually have led the way for, in the case of Coca-Cola, for more than 150 years. And individuals have to understand what it is that they stand for, what's really most important to them. For me, one of my personal characteristics and attributes or core values, I think, is freedom. I've really enjoyed the keynote and speaking business that I've created over the last 25 years. And part of that reason is it's given me a tremendous amount of flexibility and freedom. When I was growing up, I didn't have a father. My parents got divorced when I was 6. I saw my father once before he died at age 16. And the flexibility that I had as an entrepreneur rather than a person getting a paycheck from somebody else gave me the ability to spend time with my children when they were growing up. I have 3 wonderful children who've accomplished some really great things, and it's been awesome being there almost every single day as they've been growing up. Without being an entrepreneur, without freedom being one of my core values, I might have been doing the 9-to-5 grind every single day. And those folks are gone 5 days a week and home 2. And when I was doing keynote and training services, I was home 5 days a week, and I was typically gone on the road 2. And I saw my clients for therapy between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. when they were at school. So being an entrepreneur really gave me the life of freedom that has been so important to me.
That freedom actually is a word that's used probably every 2 or 3 different definitions of the word success, and I think the best part about that question is there is no right or wrong answer. It's personal, and so many people have their different spins on it, so I'm really glad that you touched on that, and you also incorporated your children in there as well. So I think that's the best part about success is it's not just about a dollar amount, and it's not just about a house or materialistic things. It's obviously important to have the ability to have a home and those type of things, but when you look at the question and the answer, it's more about the freedom, the opportunity, and for people to do what they want when they want.
I have wonderful children. My oldest son is a sergeant in the Army. He's a leader in his work. My daughter just graduated with her degree in speech language pathology, which I'm really grateful for because I need a free speech language pathologist. And my son just graduated with his master's degree in economics, and he took a job for a large city as an economic policy analyst. And I'm really proud of what they've accomplished. And entrepreneurship has given me the opportunity to really, I think, help them learn to be independent individuals who are also leaders. I think leadership actually does begin at home. But one of the things you said I want to touch base on, and that is that while all of these sort of meaningful and altruistic things are important to my definition of success, it's also really important to me that the car I drive doesn't break down and that I can actually afford comp and collision insurance and that the house that I live in is in a nice neighborhood where I feel a sense of peace and tranquility. So in my definition of success, I do think that some of the material things that we strive for should be realized because they're really the rewards of our labors that help us to be comfortable in the wonderful things that have happened to us.
No, I couldn't agree more with that, and I do think that there are obviously those important things in life and where you live and how you live and being able to get to and from work and other things are definitely important. So I'm glad you touched on that. So I wanted to ask you, one of the things we often touch on is the importance of having a morning or a daily ritual. And I was curious if you have a morning ritual of your own.
I do have a morning ritual of my own. I moved away from goal setting a long time ago. And the reason why I moved away from goal setting a long time ago is they were really frustrating to me. I would get towards my goal, and the natural tendency we have is as we go towards a goal that we're not hitting to revise our goal downward so we don't feel bad about not hitting our goals. And goal setting can actually be a death spiral of mediocrity. And I felt anxious about my goals and I felt stressed about my goals because I was taught, like most people are, that goal setting is the single most important thing. I heard quotes like, if you aim for nothing, you'll hit nothing. Then I learned about intention setting, and intention setting is different than goal setting. It's not about the future, it's about right now. And it was the great master Oogway who told us something really important. He said, yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, all we have is the present, and that's why it's a gift. The great master Oogway, of course, being the turtle from Kung Fu Panda. Now that I've learned Chinese, Oogway is also the word for turtle. But intention setting is about right now. Goals are about the future. The future isn't here. It doesn't actually exist. And when we focus on our goals too much, we lose sight of this moment. So I begin every day with a morning ritual, and that is setting an I am intention statement. And the reason why I use it in an I am format is nobody else can say I am for you. You're the only one who can say I am. So intentions, unlike goals, which are often projections of what others want for us, are something that's in the present and specifically come from within me. So my ritual is when I get in the shower, I take an extra minute in the shower and I think about what intention I would like to set for the day. And I can't sing in the shower because I'm a monotone, but I say my intentions out loud in the shower. I am trustworthy. I am content. I am energetic. I am abundant. I am happy. Whatever my intention for the day is, I am strong in my communication. And I say that in the shower. Some people sing in the shower. I say my intentions in the shower. Then I get out of the shower. And then throughout the rest of the day, I try to follow up that ritual by consciously at various points paying attention to the intentions that I set in the morning. And I ask myself the question, have you been stepping into that intention with every step forward throughout the day? And when I do that, it makes a tremendous difference. And I've looked back at the previous months where in many cases I would have set goals. And I find that by setting intentions instead, I exceed any goals I would have set wildly.
It's interesting. I don't want to put words into your mouth, but based on how you define that, I'm curious if you feel that affirmations are more similar to intentions.
I think affirmations are definitely a way to form our intentions. Good affirmations come from intentions. So I think there's a lot of overlap between the two. Affirmations can involve I think a broader set of things than intention settings, but the I am intentions are really affirmations.
No, I love that concept. I am. I think it's Joel Osteen, who's obviously a professional minister and speaker and has written a ton of books. But he had a book that I read a little bit of many years ago, and it was The Power of I Am. And I think that's really important. So I'm glad you touched on that. So I wanted to ask. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, one of my friends wrote a best-selling book titled I Am and the Law of Attraction. His name is R.J. Banks. He's actually the co-author on my book. And his book has been a book which has taught me the ideas of setting I am intentions. And through his mentorship, I think I've really
stepped into something wonderful.
No, I like that. I think the two words "I am" have just so much power to them. So I wanted to ask you, one of the things that we try to do is we try to dig a little bit deeper. And one of the things we're talking about is our pay it forward movement. And I was curious, when I said the words pay it forward, what does that mean, or what comes to mind to you?
The idea in transformational leadership is first to change ourselves so that we have the ability to lead teams and create something bigger than ourselves through leadership. But the essential idea of transformational leadership is that when transformation takes place, we leave behind a cadre of leaders who can then lead others long after we're gone. Randy Dobbs wrote an excellent book titled Transformational Leadership. He's the former CEO of General Electric Capital. And he really stressed leaving a cadre of leaders as essentially your wake behind the work that you do, so that the work that's been done is sustaining. And I think the idea of paying it forward is done by mentoring other people, by engaging other people, so that long after we're gone, whether it's a job position that we might move on from, or whether it's because we're done with our life, there's something sustaining and something lasting. You know, business is amazing. There are businesses that have been around for 1,200 plus years. There's a building company in Japan that's been around, I think, for 1,600 years. There's a restaurant in Switzerland that's been around for 1,200 years. You know, Colgate has been around for 200 plus years. HarperCollins has been around for 200 plus years. Business, like art and literature, can be sustaining, and by paying it forward, we create a cadre of leaders who can then go on and continue the work that we've done with an even greater level of enthusiasm. This is what I think the definition of viral leadership is, moving beyond simply the success of the moment and into something that creates lasting transformation.
That's a great definition of it, paying it forward. I think you can use the word mentor, training, coaching, but the reality is if you pay it forward, you in fact are giving it to somebody else, and the hope is that they would pay it forward as well. So before we let you go, Rich, I wanted to ask if you have any parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners.
Since you reminded me earlier of reading the book of Mental Chemistry, one of the things that Charles Haanel teaches that I think is an interesting concept is that nothing ever existed without it being an idea first. So the microphone I'm speaking into, it's a Rode NT1. That's the brand and the model number. Without some audio engineer actually creating this idea, this microphone I'm speaking into could not exist. The car in my garage could not exist unless somebody decided that their idea was to create a good-looking, affordable sedan that would fit within the smaller garages we have in today's current suburban America. And everything has to be an idea first in order for it to exist. The desk, the mailbox outside of my house. Well, happiness has to be an idea first. Success has to be an idea first. Gratitude has to be an idea first. Resiliency has to be an idea first. So one of the things that I try to do is I decide to take my intention and then create a reality out of that idea with every step I take. I view the threshold of my door, that separator between, of course, my laundry room back hallway and my garage, as my marking point of the day. And I often say to myself, as I step over the threshold of the door today, I'm stepping into abundance, or I'm stepping into confidence, or I'm stepping into shared partnerships with the people in the world around me. And that's made a huge difference in my life.
No, I think it's so important too. It goes back to some of the things that we talk about on our show with the law of attraction and the book and the movie, The Secret. It talks about, seeing it and feeling it and believing it. So I'm really glad you touched on that. Last question, for any of our listeners that would like to connect with you or follow you, what's the best way for them to do so?
The best way to find me is on my website, richardnongard.com. But since people can't seem to spell Nongard always, viralleadership.com takes you to the exact same place. There's information about my book, which is available both in audio and in ebook and in paperback, and about the speaking services that I do right there at viralleadership.com.
Well, I truly appreciate not only the time you spent with us today, but also some of the great information you shared, and I definitely would recommend our listeners checking out your website and connecting with you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. It's been great talking to you and great talking to the listeners.
Thank you for listening to episode number 146. When Richard lost his voice and the ability to speak, he also lost the opportunity to perform either of his jobs. With a relocation to Las Vegas and a new doctor, Richard kept on going and didn't quit. His definition of success was unique. He defined it as living your values, what's important to you, and freedom. One thing Richard shared with us was how nothing was ever created without first being an idea. The advice Richard would have given to the 20-year-old version of himself I thought was perfect. That advice would have been to follow your dreams and the things that you want most. As we all encounter challenges and obstacles throughout our lives, I feel that many of us put what we really and truly want to the side and focus on others and their needs and their wants. Now, I want to be clear. It is very important to consider others. But if you always put everyone and everything else before you, eventually you will be in the negative. So my challenge today is very simple. What is the one thing you can do for yourself today? What is one thing that will make you feel better and one thing that you really and truly miss or have always wanted to do? Don't neglect your priorities or your job, family, and career. But when the day is over, or as you are starting your day, make one thing for yourself a priority and put it on your calendar, and don't go to bed tonight until you've done that one thing for yourself. Prioritize yourself and go for your greatness. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.